first, I want to kind of give you an overview of what we're going to be doing today. So the session is definitely going to end by 7:30. We're going to have a couple of breakouts, and we're also going to get into what violence interruption work is and what it looks like in Philadelphia and in other places. Let me get this. Let me do share screen situation. Okay, yes. Share. Okay, how do I do this? I think this one. Okay. Nikki made this pretty for me in Canva, so thank you, Nikki, even though she's not on here. Maybe she'll watch this later. Oh, also, I'm recording it, so if you want to send it to your friends later, feel free. And this is kind of the overview of what we're going to be doing this evening. So we're going to start early with the breakouts. And I probably am going to be doing that in just a second. You're going to have 15 minutes in the breakout to introduce yourself to one another and say why you came tonight. And then we're going to get into the prompt. So let me drop that in the chat now. Or Lily, can you maybe do it in the chat?
Yes,
You can. Okay, cool. So basically, I want you to think about a time when you saw a fight or argument escalating among strangers. What did you do in that situation? What did other people do? Were the police called? Did they come if they were called? And how is the situation resolved? And, maybe most importantly, what do you want to happen in that sort of situation? And so let's see, how do I trying to do. Oh, Lily, I really thought I was going to be able to do breakout
I
rooms.
know. If you click more or participants, that's usually where it's at.
Okay, I clicked more and it's unfortunately not there, but let's see. Is it under here? Under participants? Did I do something else weird with the Zoom and now
It's possible that it's not in the Zoom settings.
Oh, I am so bad at Zoom, unfortunately. Oh, interesting.
Let's see.
I think that I probably somehow did not create a setting to do breakout rooms.
Okay.
Is that your hypothesis as well, Lily?
That is what I think, yes.
Yes, awesome. Okay, so
We could either, Kris, just we could either pause and take a second and change the settings and come back, or we could do one group combo.
I think we're gonna do one group combo.
Great.
I don't want to hop off, hop on. Yeah. So
That sounds good
we're
to me.
gonna roll with it. Um. So yeah, maybe folks can. I don't know who wants to start. I mean, thankfully, there's a small group of us, and so we just have a bigger breakout room. But I don't know if anybody wants to start sharing why they came tonight, their name, and yeah, if there's like a situation that you're thinking about that you've seen and what happened. And Susan, I see that you have unmuted.
Sure, I can start. I actually haven't seen a scenario like you described, but in Delaware County, we have sort of an unfortunate situation where we have all these little boroughs and municipalities with their own police forces. And out here, what happens when there is a fight or somebody sees something that they don't know how to deal with themselves, they call 911. And then it's up to our 911 emergency dispatch services to decide who they're going to call. And in a situation like a fight or even a mental health breakdown, it's the police that generally get sent, and they are really not trained are equipped to deal with a lot of the situations that they're forced with and to deal with. And I know this because I've participated in some municipality police accountability work here and talked to at least in my township, the police. And so what happens is there is a backup sort of mental health group that they can call for, but generally they're so slow in getting to the scene that the police have to resolve it, you know, before they come. So it's an issue out here in Delaware County, and I'm not really sure how we're going to address it, but I'm hoping, like always, to get inspiration from you guys and to have some talking points to share out to people I know. So that's why I'm here.
Thanks so much. Who would like to go next?
I'll go next. Hi, my name is Stephanie Schechner. I do some volunteer work with Philly. And so the topic was interesting to me and just looking to expand my knowledge. I have seen strangers fighting a number of times. When it's a couple fighting, I have verbally intervened myself. The time that I remember most vividly, I was at home in an apartment and a man and woman were arguing in the street, and my boyfriend at the time was like, should we call the cops? And I'm like, she seems like she's holding her own. They're arguing. They're verbally arguing. You and I verbally argue. Like, just because they're in the street doesn't mean that the cops are necessary. But we kind of kept watching just to see. And at a certain point, the woman started shoving the man, and then he went after her and she was screaming and you couldn't really see where she was. So I told my boyfriend, call the cops, and I threw open the window and yelled, stop now. And I said, the cops are coming. And the guy said, oh, don't call the cops. I'm like, we already called. They're coming. Stop. And so he left. And people in the house next door where this woman was from came out then, and she ended up leaving on a stretcher. You know, at the time, I really felt like I didn't understand why more people didn't get involved. And, you know, my boyfriend was like, other people might have gotten involved. You don't know that you're the only one that called the police. You don't. But listening to someone being beaten, and this was before the time where everyone was armed all the time. I was looking for something to throw, and I do not have a good arm, no aim. And I probably would have gone out and continued to holler and raise ruckus that way. I think ideally I would have seen more people come out, because I think that probably would have helped stop it, just the presence of more people. Yeah. So yeah, I always feel kind of a little bit lost. I usually feel like I start saying something, but I'm not sure what I would do next.
Stevie. Oh, Melanie, I see you unmuted.
Sorry. So I'm Melanie Gosley. I'm here as a part of my summer internship and my grad school program. I'm in grad school for social work. So I am doing a project, doing some research on either like police co-responder programs or also just like crisis intervention kind of programs without the police. So I'm just kind of here, you know, seeing what's out there. I just started the project this week. So this is like just dipping my foot into like all of these different kind of programs. So yeah, and then I cannot think of a time that I saw a fight or argument among strangers. I am sure it has happened. It's just nothing is coming to me right now. So yeah, not sure about that one.
What about you, Miss Stevie?
Well, hi everybody. My name is Diddy. I'm here because Kris is my friend, and anything to do with Amistad, I'm gonna always represent there for them. But as far as fights, there's no such things as fights here on Allegheny Avenue. It's either shootings or there's nothing else. So the cops are always called, but of course they'll get here too late, or everybody's already scattered, but there's no regular fight out here. What I wish to be done is that it stops, that it's not to where I'm saying the police shouldn't be here, but that, somebody's got to talk to these young people, put some sense into their head, let them know that life is valuable, It means more than a corner, and more than drugs, and more than money, because it's usually them against themselves. Who's making more money, and then gets into an argument, and then here comes the shooting. And if you happen to be there, nobody's going to tell you get out the way. So something's got to be done. What? I don't know, but something's got to be done. Thank you.
Thank you, Miss Stevie. Derek, I'm not gonna totally put you on the spot, but I don't know if you wanna just kind of say your name, like introduce yourself a little bit. We're just doing kind of like a go round thing.
Yeah, sure. My name is Derek. I'm Amistad's lead field organizer. Um, yeah. I don't know anything else you really want me to get into details or talk about. So
No, I think that's cool. Yeah, we're just talking about this breakout, but yeah, I was like, I don't want to put you on the spot now. I just hopped on. But yeah, so we're gonna do a report back, but obviously we don't need to do a report back because we all were able to listen to it. But I think when we're talking about violence, when we're talking about violence interruption work, I think one of the things that comes up for a lot of people is police. When people think about how to prevent violence or what should happen after a violent situation, people think about police. Let's see. Am I doing the screen share correctly? Hold on.
Yeah, it works, Kris. It's
Oh,
working.
did it? Okay.
Yeah, it's working.
I was like,
You
I
can go
didn't
full
do
screen if
it.
you want, and would make it bigger, but it was working.
Okay. Oh, Lily. One
You're
day
doing great. You're doing great.
I'm gonna be way better at this.
You're doing great.
Ugh. But yes, so police. There's like sort of two distinct scenarios. The idea that police can prevent a violent situation or like intervene in a violent situation, and then also, sort of after something has happened, the idea that police are going to respond to that and I guess hopefully prevent it from happening in the future or help enact some sort of consequence for there having been this violence. So I'm going to kind of run through this point by point a bit. So one thing, a couple folks mentioned calling 911. One thing that unfortunately happens is that there are a huge number of calls that go to police or go to 911, where police get sent out for that call, kind of because there's not really a good service to send out. It doesn't really make sense for paramedics. It's like obviously not a fire. And so in those cases, a lot of times police are the people that get sent out. And so this is like a chart of just like a sampling of cities and what the 911 calls in those places look like. So there's a huge number that are low priority or medium priority. High priority is like, those actual shootings, like a very violent situation where the idea is that we need police to show up. It's like the thinking. And then the low and the medium are going to be things like maybe like an unhoused person asking people for money on the street and kind of like disrupting people being able to walk around the city. Or it could be someone who is having a mental health crisis and is like maybe yelling or in the street or seems to be in distress in some way. So these are situations where I think we don't need a police officer there. We don't need an armed person to intervene in that situation, but oftentimes that's who shows up. Susan, you talked a little bit about the services that are available where you live. And in Philadelphia, there are mobile crisis units, which on the Amistad Law Project side, we've been fighting for the last few years to get more resources to mobile crisis units that can respond to mental health and behavioral health crises without police. We did one of these pop ed sessions on mobile crisis units and what that actually looks like in Philly. And, it's something that is really powerful and definitely helps people. Also, it definitely also needs way more resources. We need many more teams, and we would love to see a move to actually expand what those teams can do, so that in addition to handling mental health and behavioral health crises, they could also show up to minor traffic accidents, to noise disturbances, when people are reporting a theft and they just need a police report to file for an insurance claim or, to kind of just like do their due diligence in that situation. We don't actually need cops there, but that's still what happens right now. And there's kind of like a whole logic behind how we should respond in these situations, which I really appreciated you talking some about, Stephanie. Where I think we kind of saw it with the murder of Jordan Neely, where there's this person who's in distress in public, on a subway car, and there are all of these people who see this person like being killed in real time. And I think there's like a lot of things going on in that moment. There's I don't know if people have heard about the bystander effect, and this idea that, which I don't subscribe to for a lot of reasons, but this idea that when there are a lot of people watching some sort of situation unfold, whether it's violence or someone in distress, there's this idea that the more people are watching, or that if there are a bunch of people watching, no one intervenes because the thinking is that someone else will, and I don't need to. The main reason I don't really believe it is because there's been like also a fair number of studies that that's not true. That like a lot of times what people will do is like there will be many people who call the cops. There will be many people who call 911 who are trying to get some sort of intervention for the person or people who are in distress. I think the bigger thing is this idea that there are some people who like this is like kind of what we expect. Like we see this person who is unhoused, who appears to be unhoused, seems to be in distress, and we're like, yeah, that person, I don't need to do something in this situation, which I think is like a different kind of thing, if that makes sense. I think kind of the idea to me of violence interruption is that a lot of this work is being done by regular people, like many who have who are credible messengers. We'll get into that a little bit, like what that actually means. But these aren't people who are like working for the city, who have a badge, who have some sort of, you know, authority to intervene in situations. It's people who maybe have life experience, maybe have other connections to the community, and are like, this is what I'm going to do because this is what my community, what my neighborhood needs. So yeah, going on to police a little bit more though. The one thing that we have a lot of, or the one resource that is never, you know, very rarely gets cut. So there's this idea that police can prevent violence. So kind of logically, in order for that to happen, that would mean a police officer would need to be present and actually witnessing violence. And even in that situation, would need to actually intervene. We saw with the school shooting at Robb Elementary School in Uvalde, Texas, that there were actually parents who were begging police officers on the scene to like go inside and save their children. And they didn't. And the US Supreme Court has actually said that police do not have a duty to protect us, which means that it's fine for them to not intervene in violent situations. And then, you know, there's also this thinking that, hey, even if they don't prevent violence, they can at least respond to it. They can at least do something after it happens. So homicides are, you know, the cases where they're the most important. They're the things that have the most resources towards them. And they have the highest clearance rates. So clearance rates are measured based on if a particular case results in an arrest. It doesn't mean that someone gets locked up. It doesn't mean that they're found guilty of anything or that anything even goes to trial. It's just, has there been an arrest in this case? And even in homicides, in Philadelphia, the clearance rate is less than 50%, which means that in most cases, nothing happens. And that's for homicides. For shootings, which are the cases where it's like the second highest priority, in about 20% of cases, someone is arrested, which is 1 in 5. And then, you know, if we're looking at anything else, it goes down even from there. So another thing that people sometimes say is like, okay, that's why we need more money for the police. If we give them more money, then they'll be able to solve more crimes, then we'll be safer, things will be better. Right now in Philadelphia, this year we're going to spend $800 million on the police, which is, I think anyone would say that's a huge number. It also happens to be the thing that the single service or department that Philadelphia is spending the most money on, more than the fire department, more than schools, more than Parks and Rec, more than the libraries. And so I think that we really can't afford to spend more money on police. And then, you know, let's see what's up the next one. Okay, so now we're getting into this idea of violence interruption work. Generally speaking, when people are talking about violence interruption, they're talking about credible, trusted messengers, mediating conflicts, and providing resources on their own streets. So there's hopefully a lot of consistency with what that work actually looks like, and a lot of training for the people who are delivering services, who are doing these interventions. But there's also a fairly limited data on what works, on which programs are most effective. And that means that there's not as many resources because we can't say which programs are most effective. And so what often happens is like some money gets spread out around to a bunch of different groups. And some of them work better than others. Some of them are more effective than others. So I'm going to show this video. Let's see. I'm going to do this. I'm going to stop the share, and
Yeah.
then I'm going
And then you're going to click the link.
Oh, yes, Lily.
And then you're going to hit share again, but you have to go to advanced.
Okay.
And
That
you're
would
going to
be
click video.
Oh, video. Huh.
And that'll mean we get the sound too.
Okay. All right. Oh, wait, no, but then it didn't do it the way I wanted to. Are you
Okay.
sure I want to click video?
You could also try it. We could see if we can do the sound if you just do desktop. Let's try that.
Okay.
I got another option if that doesn't work, but this should work.
Okay.
Yeah, there you go. It's good.
What if we reduced the police budget and hired people who have street credibility to go in and interrupt the cycle of violence? We've seen the outcome of street violence both in terms of loss of life and in terms of decades spent in prison. There are a lot of people who were part of the game and part of street violence who've spent decades in prisons turning their lives around, including a lot of people sentenced to life without parole who are currently set to die in prison because they killed someone in retaliation for the death of a family member or a friend, for example. What if we created a fully funded, professionally run program with these returning citizens and others who were formerly part of the drug economy to intervene when a shooting happens? We could be credible messengers. We could be a positive strike force who keep an ongoing presence in neighborhoods across the city. When a shooting happens, we could reach out to people directly impacted and try to dissuade people from retaliation. Preventing violence is a full-time job. In addition to responding directly to crises, we could run education programs for the youth, serve as street counselors, and connect people to resources to remedy problems in their lives. We could help the kid work in the corner prevent his grandma's foreclosure by connecting her to housing counselors. Maybe that could help him get out of the game. We could connect people who are trying to overcome addiction with drug treatment resources. And maybe our work could go beyond just stemming the tide. Our neighborhoods need healing. Maybe we could also be trained to facilitate neighborhood-based restorative justice programs where we could create some healing, or at least help settle old beefs so they don't flare up again. We can stop the violence if we use our imagination and creativity, but that won't be enough. We'll need to fuel that imagination and creativity with resources. We'll need to divert money spent on policing to fund things that truly keep us safe. We might hear that these ideas are too lofty, utopian, or even expensive. But nothing we imagine, no matter how outlandish, can possibly hold any less promise or be any more costly than the way we've been going about things so far.
Okay, so that was Gani's voice, Gani Kempa Songster, who is the Healing Justice Fellow Amistad Law Project and is a part of Healing Futures at the Youth Art and Self-Empowerment Project, which Amistad Law Project and Amistad Movement Power share office space with. And that video was made by Amistad Law Project in partnership with artist Eric Rowan. There's like another couple of those short practical abolition videos if you want to check them out on our website, on Amistad Law Project's website, not Amistad Movement Power, to be clear. But I wanted to kind of show that little video to kind of like give an overview of the kind of things we're talking about when we're talking about violence prevention work. And let's see. LOL. Thank you, Lily, for giving me claps. I don't know if you can see that in the chat. But yes, anybody right now who wants to say kind of what their understanding is of violence interruption work right now is, can either come off of mute because there aren't that many of us. So feel free, or if you want to throw it in the chat, and that could be either things that you're like, hey, I know about these things. I know about this thing happening in Philly. I know about this thing happening somewhere else. Or, if there are questions that you have in this moment, now is the time. The cat's doing weird things to my screen. Okay.
In addition to Philly that trains, peer mediators, I saw in the Inquirer there was an article about a public school in South Philly. It's a K-8 public school that's up for an award because they've taught their kids peer mediation, and they use that in the school. They don't have any other disciplinary system in the school. It's all peer mediation, and they've basically stopped having discipline problems when the kids are running the discipline system. And it seems to me that bringing this into schools is really the best bet, because then kids learn it young. If we had it in all our schools, then all the kids would know it, and eventually, so that's something that seems like it's working.
Anyone else have anything they want to add or ask? Okay, hoping that you all can see this again.
Yep.
Okay. So, talking about some violence interruption work that is happening right now in Philly. Corners to Connection is a violence interruption intervention that started in June 2021. For those 30 days of that June, there were people who were out on street corners and walking through parts of the neighborhoods in Nicetown, Northwest, and North Philly from 9 p.m. to 11 p.m. And I don't know how much actual data there is. Oh, let me go back on the program. But there is this quote from the pastor of Taylor Memorial Baptist Church, G. Lamar Stewart. We didn't have any incidents for those 30 days. In fact, on the corners we spent time on, there were no shootings in that general area each night, 0 shootings. So we believe not only will we be safe, but we will deter crime. And that was in response to him being asked, are you worried about your safety going into the next year? Because they did the program again in June of 2022. I didn't see anything about June of 2023. I'm not sure if they're doing other work now, or what exactly is happening with that. But it also was a combination of faith leaders and churchgoers. They also last year had a Father's Day march that they called 100 Fathers for Peace. And the idea is to get people who live in the neighborhoods, who have a connection to their neighbors, to their neighborhoods, actually out engaging people. And so what they did specifically on those evenings was stop and talk to people, ask them if they needed jobs, if they needed connections to different services, and then they would work to provide those connections. So some of the folks were social workers, in addition to just being people who care about their neighbors. So that is one project that is happening. Then generally, we're kind of getting into sort of different overall buckets of violence intervention work happening in the city. So there's some work that's happening in more institutions, Cure Violence is a huge one. It's currently run through Temple University, which is based in North Philly, and also the work that Cure Violence does is based in North Philly. Cure violence in particular is actually an international effort. And so there are cities around the world that have cure violence programs. And the rationale or the framing of cure violence is that violence is a public health issue. And so the program is designed to reduce the spread of violence through interrupting its transmission, concentrating on those at highest risk, and changing social norms that propagate violence. And so there's really this like framing of violence as something that like is like essentially a disease and something that we can therefore treat and prevent it from spreading. And so there's one of the other locations, one of the other cities is Chicago, where this work is being done. And they train outreach workers to identify immediate conflicts. And then they specifically work with people at high risk of either harming people or of being harmed, being victimized in some way. And the hope is that as they connect them to services, they'll be less likely to commit violence. Then there's the Community Crisis Intervention Program, which is run by the city. And it seems like from my research, like they're hiring credible messengers, which this credible messenger term, I realize has now come up multiple times. And I said I was going to get into more of what that was and like didn't really. So a lot of times credible messengers are people who have been a part of the game, people who have been drug dealers, who have been locked up for different sorts of crimes, usually violent crimes, people who were a part of gangs, who were a part of like, who at one point were involved in like different street beefs and that sort of thing, and now have shifted things in their lives in some way. But there's also some programs that are more or less connected to like government, to like the city that they're running. And we're going to get into some more of kind of like why that is. But one of the big things that it seems like the programs that are most effective do is refuse to share information with the police, which, you know, might be kind of obvious why that's important. But basically people who are doing things that are illegal don't really want to talk to people who are going to turn around and give that information to the police. And so it's really important if you're going to be doing effective violence interruption work that you're not going to snitch, that you're trying to mediate conflicts with people or help them mediate conflicts with one another, but that you make a commitment that you're not going to turn around and say, you know, hey, so this person told me that, you know, he shot this other person and now, you know, they're maybe going to shoot them, and like, because then the whole thing falls apart and you actually don't have an effective violence prevention program at that point, or violence interruption program. So there are also a number of small organizations in Philadelphia, many that are run by people who were formerly incarcerated. One of them is GROWN, which stands for Gaining Respect Over Our Worst Nights. And these two men here in black shirts are actually, I'm pretty sure both former juvenile lifers. I know for sure one of them is. I'm like pretty sure they both are. But GROWN canvases blocks, forms relationships, and then conducts needs assessments for communities after there are incidents of violence. And they have a commitment to not work with the police, to not work with city agencies. And so as a result, they don't have a lot of resources and, you know, are really doing really important work on a very small budget. There are some other efforts in Philly. Frontline Dads is also run by a formerly incarcerated person, Ruben, who you can see in the green hoodie and the sort of like tan and black hat, kind of in the middle. And Frontline Dads really focuses a lot on mentorship of young people, making sure that young people have opportunities to learn and grow and hear from people who were in similar situations when they were younger, and like sort of how they changed their lives and created more opportunities for themselves. And there's also this app that exists. I couldn't find information about like sort of how effective the app is or what the numbers look like as far as people using the app. But the idea is that you can press the button and get a mediator or get some other services of, like to you. And hopefully that will result in people being able to mediate conflict without violence. So there's also violence interruption work happening in many other cities. Some of it seems really exciting. There was a New York Times article in the last few weeks about a program in New York City where I think it was for some period of time, maybe a week or a couple weeks, where police were not going to answer 911 calls in like a small area of, I think, Queens. And the idea was that community members were answering those calls. And they were able to intervene in a lot of situations, help a lot of people, and seems to be pretty effective. There also, in the article, were some people who were like, I hate this idea. It makes me feel like we're being left to nothing. Which I think is one thing that's like important to really grapple with and unpack a bit when we're talking about violence interruption work, because there is this sense that the thing that we always have is police. And when you take that away, when you're telling people that like, no, actually you need something else, there can be this feeling of like abandonment. And like the one service that we did have, now we don't have, and now we have nothing. And I unfortunately did not put a slide in here about Yeah Philly, although I really love Yeah Philly's work. And I'm going to talk about Newark Community Street Team in a minute, which is based in Newark, New Jersey. But for this season of Amistad Law Project's podcast moving forward, I actually interviewed folks from Yeah Philly in addition to NCST in Newark. And so I have, some idea of what NCST does. They do, but, definitely feel free to correct me, Stephanie. But they have trained a number of young people in mediation, both like shorter trainings and also longer trainings. Hundreds of young people a year they're training. They also have something called Group, where young people are able to sort of like provide one another it's kind of group therapy. It's kind of like training. It's kind of like a support group, but it's like a space where they can really talk about their feelings and really process with one another, and like have a space that doesn't exist for young people in this city in a lot of places. And also a really great thing about Yeah Philly is that they have a physical location in West Philly where young people can come in and do homework, can play video games, they can record music, they can hang out. That is what Yeah actually stands for. It's I know
youth
yes.
empowerment,
Advancement hangout.
hangout. Yes.
And so it's like literally a physical space where young people can hang out. They also provide resources for people to be able to access therapy. As we know, most of the people in the city who are most impacted by gun violence are young people, are teenagers, are young adults, and that's the population of folks that Philly is working with. And so really important work. That's one other thing. Oh, also Philly meets people where they are and really believes in meeting people's needs, sort of regardless of what those things are. And so they also do things like give people pet food, and they'll like pay people's bills, and that sort of thing. So I don't know if I missed anything, Stephanie. Okay, I really love Philly. So as soon as you said Philly, I was like, why don't I have a slide in here about what am I doing? But another organization I wanted to talk about, another org that we actually went up to Newark to meet with a bit and to talk to Aquila, is Newark Community Street Team. So I'm gonna show this video real quick. So let's see. You must stop share. Click on this video. Okay, and then I'm going to share again.
I got speed. All right, send speed. 717, take 1.
Aquila Sherrills, Executive Director of the Community-Based Public Safety Collective, President and Board Chair of the Newark Community Street Team. We're at an inflection point in terms of public safety in this country. The public execution of George Floyd signaled for us that law enforcement at this ubiquitous single point of contact for safety in our communities is just a false narrative. When we talk about reimagining public safety, it's not just about investing in more procedural justice training and de-escalation strategies for law enforcement. It's also about investing in community-based infrastructure, community-based public safety as a complement to law enforcement to make our neighborhoods safe. Public safety is not just the absence of violence and crime. It's the presence of well-being and the infrastructure to support victims and survivors in their respective healing journey. So community-based public safety is a system of services that is actually operated by residents, utilizing a resident relationship-based approach and working through the public health lens. We understand that violence is a public health issue, and those who are closest in proximity to the issue should be equipped with the tools, the skills, and the resources to intervene, to prevent, and to treat issues of violence in our respective neighborhood. And so for us, that means hiring credible messengers, ex-gang members, ex-convicts, folks who potentially have been just as involved, to serve as interventionists, as outreach workers, as victims advocates, as community health workers embedded in hospitals, to meet people where they are.
Aquila is amazing. I don't know if you could tell from that video, but he actually, so if you listen to the podcast, this season of the podcast, we were sort of trying to tell the story of street violence in Philadelphia and in places like it, both now and also in the late 80s, early 90s, when there was that, when people were talking about super predators, and there was like this huge spike of violence, and it was kind of like, what are we going to do? Everything is terrible. And we know more recently, with the pandemic, we've seen a similar thing with violence spiking, and also a similar crackdown on young people, especially with kind of being like, these young people are wild and we can't control them, and we have to keep them out of public, and we can't allow them to gather. Like we've seen so many policies enacted in the city trying to keep young people from just hanging out and existing in public. But I'm trying to think of, I'm trying not to spoil the podcast too much while also talking about Aquila. So let me pull my whatchamacallit back up. Slideshow. Okay. So Newark's mayor is Ras Baraka. He's actually in his third term right now. They do not have term limits in Newark, fun fact. And one of the things he did when he came into office was start North Community Street Team. And he'd done some work with Aquila Sherrills, who at that point was living in LA. He's from LA. And he convinced Aquila to move to Newark to start NCST and to really build the program from the ground up. And so there's a lot of things that have been incredibly powerful with that. One, there's like a really robust infrastructure. Aquila actually has an enormous amount of anti-violence skills and training, going back to the 90s when he was a part of brokering the truce between the Bloods and the Crips in LA. He also is someone who came up during the gang war of the early 80s and like the decade plus that followed in LA, where, you know, some years there were 1,000 people who were killed in a year. And so this is like really work that he has been doing for years. And Newark, fun fact, is actually about 15 minutes from where I grew up in East Orange, New Jersey. And so I first heard about NCST because of this 50% statistic of this reduction in homicides in Newark. And I was gonna like, I have to learn more about this because this doesn't sound like a real thing. That this organization was able to reduce the homicide rate that significantly. But from when NCST was founded, Newark is much smaller than Philadelphia. But the homicide rate in like in 2019 was just over 100. And I could be wrong about these dates now that I'm thinking about it. But basically a few years after NCST was created, the homicide rate went from being just over 100 to being 51. And even as we saw that spike of gun violence, that spike of homicides in cities across the country, the rate of violence and the rate of homicides in Newark actually stayed flat. So during the pandemic, they actually didn't see the same thing that we were seeing in other places. So the work of NCST is sort of multifaceted. So there are folks who are doing safe passage work, who literally are standing out on the streets as young people are going to and from school, making sure that when there are altercations between kids, things like popping off, they're intervening and making sure that young people can go to and from school safely. They also do a lot of mediation work that people either can initiate themselves, or when they know about a beef, an altercation, something percolating, they intervene in those situations and, you know, offer to mediate, talk to people about the benefits of resolving this conflict without people getting shot, without more violence. And they also do a lot of work with victims. Interestingly, I don't know if this is the case in other places, but in Newark, there actually were victim services were not allocated and were not going to people who were involved in violence, who had any sort of record, because the thinking was that those people weren't real victims, essentially. And so what that meant was there were an enormous number of people who really needed victim services who were like de facto ineligible. In NCST, some of the work they did was actually changing that so that someone's prior criminal record or even current involvement in the justice system would not mean that they couldn't access these services. Because, you know, we know anecdotally, at least, if not like, you know, really deeply personally, that people who get shot, like sometimes shoot other people who have people who like shoot someone, a lot of times they were shot first, and that all of these things are actually connected. And it's not like there's like a delineation between, here are the victims over here, and then here are the quote unquote perpetrators. Let's see. Looking at the time. Yes. So if you like podcasts, maybe even if you don't really like podcasts, I definitely would suggest that you listen to this season of Moving Forward. You'll get to hear a lot about Keela's personal story, and also about the work of NCST, the work of Yeah Philly, and also of Healing Futures, which I mentioned a little bit with talking about Ghani. But Healing Futures is a pre-charge restorative justice program involving young people in Philadelphia. And so basically, when there is some sort of violent situation, a young person, instead of going through our sort of traditional criminal legal system, can be diverted into Healing Futures before they're actually charged with a crime. So that means they don't have a record associated with this incident. And then through Healing Futures, they actually can get the support they need. They can do different things to actually try and repair the harm that they committed, that they enacted upon someone else. And it's obviously also anti-violence work. So yes, I've been talking a bunch. So now I'm going to do another breakout, but not a breakout because we can't do breakout rooms. So it's more of a prompt that people can kind of popcorn around. Let's see. I'm going to stop the chat for a second so I can copy and paste this into the chat. But the prompt is, how can you interrupt violence in your neighborhood, in your community, in communities, and what skills do you need to grow in order to be able to do that? And also, hello, Nikki, I see you're on. Are you in a place where you can like maybe briefly introduce yourself? Okay, no worries if not. But yeah, I don't know if anybody wants to hop in first. I don't mind calling on people. Okay, Derek, I'm gonna call on you first. Nikki, are you there now? No, you're in a car apparently. Okay, she's also messaging me on the side. Okay, I hate to do it, Susan, but what about you?
Wow, I would have no idea actually how to intervene in an argument or an altercation, other than like maybe stand near the people having the altercation and like be a presence. Yeah, I would actually have no idea. So sorry about that.
I really appreciate your answer. Yeah.
Yeah, I never saw an argument, but I have been like on a train platform where it looked like somebody was, pestering somebody else, like a guy coming too close, and I've just gone and stood near the woman that, and that's sort of, yeah, that's it.
I think I definitely, whenever I see usually it's, 9 times out of 10, 19 times out of 20, it's a man harassing a woman. I'll just like ask, like, hey, are you okay? I've also seen situations where, or like, seen people talk about situations where they're actually like, they will approach the woman like they know her, even if they don't, to kind of create some space and to, make that person feel like they're not alone. Really, both people make them feel like she's not alone. And like, it is like a really complicated thing when we're talking about safety and violence. I think as like a society, the trajectory that we have to be on is one where we intervene. But I think what that looks like for all of us is going to be different. I think the expectations and like the capacity of a very buff 25-year-old are going to be very different from a 15-year-old, and they're going to be very different from a 75-year-old, just by nature of like what violence is and the physicality of what it can mean to intervene. But also, this is my cat. She was being a little bit of a brat. But I also think that that there are many situations in which just being a witness and being present and actually making sure that people know that you're there and that you see what's going on is actually really important. If people are interested in talking more about ways that they can build their skills in intervening in violence and in hopefully preventing violence, it is a thing that I thoroughly enjoy talking about. I really love talking about transformative justice and transformative justice processes, community accountability processes, and also mediation, which is distinct but definitely related to that work. And just because I have talked about them, I'll now give a 90-second version of what transformative justice is. And so transformative justice, the framework of transformative justice came from people who were survivors mostly of sexual harm. And many people were sex workers, and therefore were not calling the cops because the cops would harass them. Sometimes the cops were the people who were harming them. And so the impetus was creating a way to hold people accountable, to keep each other safe without police. And so now what community accountability processes look like in sort of the best case scenario is there's someone who has been harmed, there's someone who has committed harm, and there is a desire on the part of both of those people to for there to be accountability. And there doesn't need to be involvement from both of those parties. And like sometimes that's what happens in different cases. But there would be one or more support people around the person who's been harmed and one or more support people around the person who committed harm, and a process involving what that person who was harmed actually needs to heal and to be made more whole, and what the person who committed harm needs in order to not commit similar harm in the future. And, that process could last one session, which is like extremely rare, or months, usually not more than a year, because past that you've kind of reached the point of diminishing returns. but it involves a lot of work and a lot of resources and people who are volunteering their time. And it also involves everybody consenting to that process. There are many ways in which these processes can go sideways and like actually not be the sort of generative, affirming process for everyone involved. But when everything goes well, it's really beautiful. And like, I think really kind of is like a North Star of what could be possible in our world and like when we harm each other. So yes, definitely down to talk to people anytime about these things. Lots and lots of fun. But that is all I have for us today. I don't know if anybody has any questions. I'll just open up the floor for questions in case there are any. But it's a small crew, and so I wouldn't be surprised if there were not any. Not to dissuade you from asking if you do. Okay. And also, anyone can definitely reach out to me. My email address is Kris, Kris, @amistadpower.org. I see you unmuted, Susan. Do you have a question?
I just wanted to thank you.
Yeah, me too. I just want to say thank you.
Thank you for coming out tonight. And I also wanted to let you know about our next op-ed session. It's actually going to be led by none other than Sean Damon on Thursday, August 10th. It's going to be called Redemption is Real, Strategies to End Life Without Parole. So folks on this call might know that there are over 5,000 people in Pennsylvania who are sentenced to die in prison due to a life without parole sentence. That's the highest per capita rate in the United States. And it doesn't have to be this way. We need to be strategic and organized to offer pathways for reformed lifers to come home. And so
Amen, yes.
August 10th, there was in the email announcing this one on the bottom, it like sort of mentioned that one was coming up. But also we're going to definitely send out some more emails about that one as we get closer. And
all I would need would be the link.
Yes, we will send that out as well. And also this one will be up on the internet at some point. Sean is gonna edit it and put it on the website. But thank you so much to everyone for coming out tonight. And yeah, I'm gonna close this out. That's it.
See you on the 10th, everybody.
Yep. Thank you. Bye.
Have a good night.
You too. Bye.